Hi, I'm SIRMA. This is the room I grew up in at my parents' house in Istanbul, and this is where I'm stuck at during this quarantine. I got here early March to do a vocal production workshop as part of the Sonar Istanbul festival, and I decided to remain here and wait this whole thing out. I was a guest at his Twitch stream. He asked me if I would be interested in joining this challenge that he does, which is the Turkish version of Andrew Huang's Four Producers, One Sample. He said, we each have 24 hours. There will be one sample. Everyone makes their individual tracks with the sample. And then 24 hours later, I collect the songs. He sends a sample, it's a horn sample, and there are some vocal chops as well. I take the horn sample, I recreate the melody within that first hour, and I just like it so much that it inspires this entire pre-chorus in my head.
I never wanted you to help yourself. I only wanted you to tie me down. Ooh. I never asked you to remind yourself where we were meant to go. How could we ever know?
It was inspired by this argument that I got into with my boyfriend, who is in the States right now. We were trying to determine exactly how we're going to handle this situation of us being apart. When it was new, it was just difficult for me to not control the situation because I don't handle ambiguity that well. The lyrics just came and the rest was history, honestly. I mean, I entered this flow state. Well, not immediately. Actually, I remember recording the pre-chorus vocals very quietly, like literally whispering. It was almost 1 a.m. at that point, and my parents were asleep. So I was just... So the structure of the song came together easily because obviously once that becomes clear, there has to be a verse before that. I could imagine how many bars that would take. I also had a time limit on the project because Mustafa said, try not to exceed 2 minutes and 30 seconds so that the video we make later on is not super long. So I was like, okay, this has to be a short song. There can't be too many sections. I know for a fact that this pre-chorus repeats 2 times. The horn sample repeats 2 times at least. And there has to be 2 verses. The samples I received that apparently belonged to the same pack or something. The first one was this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one didn't exactly inspire me, but I knew that I could take bits and pieces out of it and use as embellishment in the song. The main sample that I built the song around, the original was this. I heard that and I really liked the rhythm, and I knew that I wanted to redesign the melody, lower the quality of the sound. I reached for a melodyne because I thought if I transfer this into melodyne as a monophonic instrument, even though it's not, because you can hear in the horn sample, there are several layers, even though it's just one monophonic melody. Whenever there are more than one instrument, melodyne still does a good job of analyzing it, but it kind of messes with the quality of it a little bit, but in this case, in a good way. When I transferred it and I recreated certain parts of the melody, it became this. You can hear those weird glitchy glidey sounds that happened once I just pitched things up or down, like especially that. I just knew I have to embrace this sound that is just breaking apart. I was playing around with the Sound Toys crystallizer, and I had this idea of what if there was this really lush, really big reverb sound creating this fog, and then the fog dissipates, and then you hear the horn sample coming in. To create that, I printed the crystallizer, the horn sample with the crystallizer on it, and reversed it. And then put the little plates from Sound Toys, EQ'd it in a way so that it wouldn't sound muddy or harsh. I have the crystallizer again here, and it's all the way to wet in the mix knob. So that means that I'm not going to hear the dry sample itself. When it's 100%, it's just going to be the affected version of it full on. And that's with the Echo Boy that's following it. Black hole to create really big reverb effects. Usually I go for the black hole or Valhalla shimmer. Valhalla shimmer sounds a little thinner than black hole to me, although you can achieve similar sounds with it. I have another version of the horn sample here, the same horn sample, but in this case, it only has the Echo Boy and black hole on it. I had this rain stick lying around, and I thought the rain stick could really work well with the crystallizer. And there are all these effects on it, of course. Well, noise gate is something that you kind of have to use when you're working with home recorded samples, if you're working quickly, especially. And obviously a low cut EQ as well, just to get rid of those room sounds happening in the background. Isotope vinyl is really cool for aging any sample that you record on your own. Valhalla shimmer is just my secret weapon for anything that sounds ethereal in my music. I use it on vocals, I use it on this kind of stuff, I use it on synths. One of the most unique things about this production to me is the pad I made with my voice. I sampled my vocals, put them on Iris by Isotope. You can see like Vox sample 6, 7, 2, 1. With a sampler synth like Isotope Iris, you can combine up to 4 samples, mix them in a different way. It just gives you a lot of freedom. And the master filter just sounds so good on the synth. When I put the Warm Synth LP on the master filter and turned up the glide, it just created this really deep sounding synth. When I don't have any of the effects on, it sounds like this. That sounds even more interesting with the Soundtoys Primal Tap on it. I thought of this tuned kick pattern, which would be doing double duty as a kick pattern and a bass, like a sub bass. So I found really quickly a kick that would work for this purpose. I tuned them all with the transpose window here. I EQ'd and compressed, and it turned into this. Even though when I had that kick come in, the horn sample cuts out and we arrive at the verse section, I was thinking when I made that, this is all going to come together. In the drop, we're going to hear the horn sample with this tuned kick pattern. And once I had this tuned kick in place, I also knew that I had to be really, really careful about using that deep bass that I created out of my own voice. Once that kick comes in, I have a different EQ on it. As you can see, I cut the low frequencies quite a bit. There's a little bit of dynamic EQ on it as well. And of course, I sidechained it to the tuned kick so that they wouldn't fight each other. I knew that I wanted to keep the verse section pretty minimal. And at that point, I was kind of looking for something that would inspire me. One of the first things that I did think about was going with this mellow brass, which everyone thinks is some sort of analog synth, but it's actually not. It's Logic retro synth. It is called mellow brass. It's a preset. And I processed it, of course, with more audio effects afterwards. The tremolator is great for this sort of stuff. If you want to make your lifeless synths come to life, make them sound more authentically analog, you can use the Soundtoys tremolator. remember spending so much time on this ARP synth, and it's so stupid because whenever you have all these plugins, you just need to go back and reassess that sound choice. Clearly I played around with this, couldn't get it to sound the way I wanted it to, and then I kept processing it with all these effects. Eventually it turned it into this. It is like a very small thing in the whole arrangement. It adds something. It's not like it doesn't add anything. It still works. It's beautiful. And I'm glad that I tried this free plugin by Glitch Machines while I was making this because I had just gotten it. Anyway, that is the pre-chorus section. I had this fat clock. I think I either quantized this or stretched it or something like that. Oh, by the way, Valhalla Frequency Echo is a free plugin also, and I usually use it on shakers, hi-hats. It allows you to shift the frequencies of the echoes. That creates a lot of variety. There was a section in the day where I just did a lot of sampling around the room, and one of the main things I did actually, I won't have time to talk about everything, but this is a hand drum that I found in the room, and I think my dad brought it from some business trip. Thought, my daughter is a musician, so wherever I go, I'm just going to pick up whatever looks like a musical instrument and she'll be happy. He wasn't wrong. Whenever I come here, I pick up those little toys or legit instruments and sample them. But here I could actually play it, which was really cool. I think I played this part of it. You hear that in the drop when the horn sample comes in. It's a perfect groove to complement the tuned kick pattern. Believe it or not, I didn't have to do much to it. I had my formula already, channel EQ, low cut, so that I can clean it up a little bit. Noise gate, same principle. Whenever I have stuff like this, if I have enough room in the arrangement, if it's a minimal arrangement, Echo Boy adds so much. Toms, hand drums, you name it. It sounds so good on this kind of stuff. Listen to this. And without it, I mean, it sounds okay, but with it, it's a whole vibe, The first drop is really very minimal. It's just a horn sample, the iris, bass, vocal pad, and then the tuned kick, some cymbals, embellishments here and there. That's pretty much it. I use FabFilter plugins for mixing a lot, and I got this during one of their sales. This was pretty much a preset that worked perfectly for the song. It was just like the perfect, subtle, flute-like synth instrument that I needed in that section. And I was just lucky to come across it after looking through some of the presets. You can spend a lot of time designing your own synth patches, but if you're in the process of making a song, it's actually not a bad idea to dig through those presets. Find something that you can work with, put some audio effects on it until it arrives at a place that you're happy with it. I built the whole arrangement, kept recording all these different types of shakers and hit the side of this drum. I just wanted to make that tribal vibe really obvious in the last chorus. I have a vocal chain already. I had to change certain things about that vocal chain because I have a different microphone. I record in a different room. Certain subtractive EQ adjustments that I did back in New York, they don't work for this setup. And I usually also record my double, triple layers with another microphone just to have these vocals blend a little better from the get-go. So I had to put different EQs on them to make them blend better. Also, you don't see it in the chain, but to be completely transparent. I melodyne these vocals. I just re-import them after I melodyne them. The reason for that is because it's really hard on the CPU. I do the same thing with declick from Isotope. If there are mouth clicks that I want to remove, I work with it and then import it back into my session. With Melodyne, I remember going very easy on this song because this was a very comfortable song for me to sing, for one thing. And it was just so much about the vulnerability of the vocals, you know? I had to protect that. So I didn't spend a lot of time on tuning. It was more about aligning them, editing them, cutting certain S and breath sounds from the double and harmony layers. If I have the S's and the breaths in the background vocal layers, they're going to be too much to handle. So my method is get rid of all the S's, all the sibilant sounds, and all the breaths from the background vocals. And I'm pretty quick at editing those at this point because it's just muscle memory and I can do it visually. When I combine them with the lead, you won't be able to hear them.
I never wanted you to help yourself. I never wanted you to help yourself.
The S in the lead is already pretty harsh sounding because that's what happens when you compress the vocals. And I have this compression strategy, which is high ratio, fast attack, fast release, with the first compressor, and the second compressor is slower attack, slower release, lower ratio. Usually, I also insert a vocal writer by Waves. These three together save me a lot of time with automation. A lot of that also comes from the recording stage. If your mic technique is pretty good, then you won't have to worry about that so much in post-production. Some of these effects channels, they're here. What happened was, at the end, I had to have this like perfect dry moment. I wanted the vocals to sound bone dry, but I also wanted the entire track to sound completely sucked in. And to achieve that, I had to automate the volume of certain return channels.
How could we ever know?
You get the idea. With vocals, the first thing I start with usually is my room reverb. FabFilter room reverb is my go-to, although there have been situations where I use a chroma verb in Logic as well. My slap delay is pretty much always the J37 from Waves. I also use it on my master because you can use it as a saturator or as a tape delay. So when I use it on my mastering chain, the delay is down, there's no delay. When I use it as a delay, I, increase the delay. To make it wider, I also sometimes finish that with the Ozone Imager, which is also a free plugin. Ozone Imager is also a part of my mastering chain. Anyway, moving on, I layer my delays and I layer my reverbs. That's what I do in vocal production. You have to create these stages, levels of depth with your delays and your reverb. And that's how you're going to create that glued together vocal sound that melts into your instrumentation. The first stage of that is the slap delay and the room reverb. Then you build depending on what you're going for. Do you want it to sound really obvious, or do you want it to be a very tiny note division so that it just like adds more flutter around the vocal? In this case, I wanted it to be super fast, as you can see. I also sometimes EQ my delays and my reverbs. The shimmer played a huge role. You'll recognize the sound of it. I'm also sending some other stuff to it, as you can hear. That's something I do when I want to make certain things exist together. I wanted the vocals and that particular synth pad to be more glued because this section is so bare and they have to talk to each other. The vocals can't just sit on top, so there has to be a connection between those two things. I also use Echo Boy in my vocal chain a lot. I like messing with different note divisions, and I, in this case, also inserted Pancake here. I love this plugin. It's free, and you can draw the shape that you want, and you can select the pattern. In this case, it's 1.5 bars. These delay plugins, they all complement each other at the end. This is the final delay on this vocal chain. As you can see, the note division went up. And moving on again with the reverb, in addition to the shimmer and the room reverb, I also used this rich chamber. I get my chamber reverbs, plate reverbs, usually from Valhalla Vintage Verb for my vocals. I also have, of course, delay throws, so I have another Echo Boy just for that. And it's nothing special, it's just a note division that's very important, obviously. I have parallel compression and saturation. I start with the H compressor from Waves. I deharsh it because sometimes it brings out certain harmonics that I don't exactly want to hear. The Decapitator mild tube Vox E is usually what I go for, but I definitely change the tone, the drive, depending on the song. I also finish that with an ozone imager. And finally, Little Altar Boy. It's at this point in every vocal production that I do. I used to record more low octave layers, but Little Altar Boy is just so full. The formant knob is very important when you want that morphed, almost male underwater sound. I'm sending the lead vocal. And I'm sending that to the parallel compression too.
Ask you to remind yourself.
This is a parallel compression / saturation channel soloed. So let's hear the vocals all together now, okay? All that processing, and this is what happens.
I never wanted you to help yourself. I only wanted you to tie me down. Ooh. I never wanted you to help yourself. 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 I only wanted you to tie me down. Ooh.
I record the lead and then I layer that with a double and triple layer in most productions, and I hard pan them left and right. With the harmony layers, I have one pan to the left, -40, the other pan to the right, +40. And that creates the perfect balance for me. So I finished pretty much everything. And then that's when I think about stuff like, okay, how can I increase the impact of each section by adding some sort of accentuators like reverse crashes or vocal samples, even like samples of my own vocals, which is something I did use in this song a lot. You know, you hear that? Those things are just so important. Like this reverse vocal, for example, is from my own, I think, verse lead vocal. I chop it up, reverse it, and then run it through some big reverb, and it can add a lot. And before that, there's a cymbal transition. I do use a lot of reverse cymbal stuff, and sometimes I use these things combined together. That's going into the first drop, for example. So I decided to use the vocal samples from Mustafa's email in a similar manner, except I did give them a big role, I would say. They're pretty loud in the mix. I used two different parts from that vocal chop sample. One is pitched down an octave. The other one in the pre-chorus section is pitched up. In the first sample, when I pitched it down, also shifted the formant all the way down, I made that wet because I only wanted to hear the altered version. But in the other one, I wanted to use it as a harmonizer. You'll be able to hear the difference. In the first one, I layered that with Echo Boy. I also put a channel EQ to really dull the sound of that sample. And then again, the second sample, there's an Echo Boy, but then there's also a Valhalla Shimmer. And you can hear the harmony there. The formant is like this. It's the shape of your mouth, technically. You can move it all the way down. You'll achieve this underwater male, like muffled sound. If you want to enhance the impact of that, that's when you put a high cut EQ like this so that it sounds even darker. You can hear the impact of these little embellishments in each section that I use them.
Even when you find me, I never wanted you to help yourself. I only wanted you to tie me down. Ooh.
My mastering chain is still a work in progress. And I should say, this was the initial mastering I did on this track. I exported it and then did a little more mastering on it. In this mastering chain, I have EQ, compressor, dynamic EQ, multi-band compressor. As you can see, I love fab filter. I have the ozone imager, tape saturation, and fab filter limiter. In the other session I also use the Oxford inflator to expand the master a little bit. But that's pretty much it. And yeah, this is how I made How Could We Ever Know?
How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? How could we ever know? I never wanted you to help yourself. I only wanted you to tie me down. Ooh, I never asked you to remind yourself where we were meant to go. How could we ever know?